My wife and her family were planning to take away half of my business and my family home. While I was busy fulfilling their needs, I once believed my life was perfect. I had a successful business, a beautiful home, and what I thought was a loving wife by my side. Her name was Lena, and when we first met, I was convinced she was the best thing to ever happen to me. She was radiant, charming, and full of life. She made me laugh like no one else could, and her presence made me feel grounded and whole. When she introduced me to her family, the Millers, I was eager to win their approval. Her parents, Richard and Martha, and her brother, Daniel, seemed warm and welcoming. They treated me like one of their own. Or so I thought. For years, I played the part of the devoted husband and son-in-law. I provided, I indulged, and I sacrificed. I covered their debts when Richard's construction business failed. I paid off Daniel's gambling loans, keeping him out of prison. I funded Martha's lavish shopping habits, while Lena convinced me it was just a little help. But I didn't mind. I was in love, and love, as I would soon learn, made me blind. For the first few years of our marriage, I barely noticed the signs. Lena and her family were constantly in need, but I was so focused on building my business that I dismissed it as natural struggles. When Richard's construction company went bankrupt, I immediately offered to bail him out. He just needs a second chance, Lena had said softly, stroking my hair as we lay in bed. He's always worked so hard. Please, Peter. He's my father. And I said yes, without question, without a second thought. I wired $180,000 to clear his debts. In my mind, it was an investment in family unity. Next came Daniel, her brother. He was a chronic gambler, his addiction leaving him in constant trouble. One night, Lena woke me up in tears, clutching her phone. Daniel's in danger, she sobbed. Some guys are after him for money. They'll hurt him, Peter. Please. Without hesitation, I paid $95,000 to settle his gambling debts. He didn't even thank me properly, just gave me a mumbled, half-hearted handshake before rushing off. I didn't care. Lena was grateful. That was all that mattered. And then there was Martha, her mother. Unlike her husband and son, Martha was subtle. She didn't ask for direct financial help. No, she was smarter than that. Instead, she had a taste for luxury. She would gush over designer bags and expensive jewelry whenever we visited. I began to gift her designer items on birthdays, anniversaries, and even casual weekends. She acted modest at first. But I noticed how her eyes sparkled every time I handed her a package with a recognizable designer label. "Oh, Peter, you spoil me too much," she would coo, fawning over the item as if she weren't already expecting it. Little by little, they bled me dry, but I didn't see it. I was too busy working, too busy expanding my business, turning it into a thriving enterprise with multiple branches and substantial annual revenue. While I was building wealth, they were slowly devouring it, and I was too trusting, too in love, to stop them. The day I began to see through the illusion was like any other. I had woken up at 5 in the morning, the way I always did, before the sun had even begun to creep over the horizon. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. I quietly slipped into my home office, still half asleep, and fired up my laptop. Emails flooded my inbox, most of them business-related, proposals, invoices, and correspondence with clients. But then I saw it, a financial alert from my bank. At first, I thought it was a standard notification, one of the many I receive daily for automatic business transactions. But when I opened it, my stomach tightened. It was a large withdrawal. $27,000 to be exact, taken from my personal account.
Confused, I scrolled through my statements, thinking perhaps it was an investment payment or business transfer I had authorized. But no. The recipient was unfamiliar. A private account under Daniel Miller's name. Lena's brother. My hand stilled on the mouse. I stared at the name, my mind trying to process it. Why the hell was Daniel receiving money from my account? I tried to convince myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe Lena had transferred it as a favor? Maybe Daniel was in trouble again, and she had acted impulsively? I decided to confront Lena about it that evening. But she was eerily casual when I asked her. "Oh, that?" she said lightly, her eyes barely leaving her phone. Daniel just needed a little help. He had a car loan to clear. I blinked. $27,000 is a little help? She rolled her eyes, sighing impatiently as if I was being unreasonable. "Peter, he's my brother. We're family. He would do the same for us." But that was a lie, and we both knew it. Daniel had never done anything for me, not once. He had leeched off my generosity for years, always with Lena as his enabler. But I didn't argue that night. I let it slide. Because I was still a fool who trusted her. After that, the cracks became harder to ignore. The next weekend, Daniel showed up at our house unannounced. He was dressed in designer clothes, a sleek leather jacket, an expensive watch glinting on his wrist. I immediately recognized the watch. I had seen it online. It cost over $12,000. The same man who was supposedly drowning in debt was now wearing luxury accessories. I couldn't resist. I asked him directly. "Hey, Daniel," I greeted with a forced smile, eyeing the watch. "That's a nice piece." "New?" He glanced at his wrist, his lips twisting into a smug grin. "Yeah. Had a little windfall, so I treated myself," he said with a wink. Windfall? No, he was spending my money.
Later that night, I checked my bank statements again, only to find 2 more large withdrawals. Both transfers had been sent to Martha, Lena's mother. $15,000 here. $10,000 there. My jaw clenched. When I confronted Lena again, she acted offended. Her voice dripped with condescension. "You're making such a big deal out of nothing," she snapped. "It's my family, Peter. What's wrong with helping them?" But it wasn't nothing. It was calculated. Deliberate. And it was becoming clear that I was nothing more than a walking ATM to them. Lena became more manipulative in the following weeks, playing on my emotions to guilt-trip me into compliance. Whenever I questioned her spending, she would turn it into a sob story about her family's struggles. "You're so lucky, Peter," she would say softly, her eyes brimming with tears. "You have your business, your independence. But my family, they're just trying to stay afloat. You have no idea what it's like." Her voice would quiver with emotion, and I would feel ashamed for doubting her. She would lean into me, wrap her arms around my waist, and press her face against my chest, whispering softly, "I just want to help them. Please don't be mad." And I would relent every time, every damn time. The night that everything changed started like any other. I had come home late from work, exhausted but determined to catch up on emails. As I climbed the stairs toward my office, I heard muffled voices from the bedroom. Lena was on the phone. I paused at the doorway, about to greet her, but then I heard my name. "Peter has no idea," she was saying, her voice low and mocking. "He's too busy working his ass off to notice anything." My brow furrowed in confusion. No idea. About what? I crept closer, my heart beginning to race. I could hear her cruel smile in her voice as she continued, "It's almost done. The lawyer is handling it. Once it's finalized, I'll get half of the business and the house. Don't worry." My blood turned cold. I pressed my palm against the doorframe, gripping it tightly to steady myself. "Peter," she said sweetly. I realized she had ended the call and turned around. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me standing there. For a fleeting second, there was panic in her gaze, but she quickly masked it with her usual saccharine smile. "Hey, babe," she cooed softly, tilting her head innocently. "Long day at work?" I couldn't speak. I simply stared at her. And for the first time, I saw her for what she was. A stranger. A viper in my bed. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding violently in my chest. Half of my business. Half of my family home. The same home my parents had left me. The home I had restored with my own hands. And she was plotting to take it away. All while smiling sweetly at me over breakfast. The next morning, I left for work early, but I didn't go to the office. Instead, I drove straight to my lawyer's office, feeling numb and furious. I explained everything I had overheard, my voice trembling with anger. The lawyer, a sharp and seasoned man, listened quietly. When I was done, he nodded once, his expression hard. "Don't worry," he said simply, "I'll make sure she walks away with nothing." For the next few days, I pretended nothing was wrong. I kissed Lena goodbye in the mornings, I held her hand at family dinners, smiled at Daniel's jokes, and played the part of the devoted fool, but every time she touched me, my skin crawled, every time she smiled, I saw the venom behind her eyes, and with every passing moment, my resolve hardened into steel. I had spent years being used, but now it was my turn. I would let them believe they had won. Let them believe they were about to take it all, and then, I would rip it away from them. I would take back everything. And leave them with nothing. I didn't wake up the morning I exposed them. I rose with purpose. There was no trace of the trembling, naive man I had once been. No hesitation. No doubt. Just pure, calculated resolve. The sun had barely begun to peek over the horizon when I slipped out of bed, leaving Lena still curled up under the covers, oblivious. I showered, dressed in a sharp navy suit, and double-checked the documents in my briefcase. The evidence. The financial records. The legal documents. Everything was prepared. I was ready to end it all. As I sat at the kitchen counter, nursing my coffee, I could hear Lena moving around upstairs. Her light footsteps padded softly across the hardwood floor. When she finally came down, she was wrapped in a silk robe. Her hair still damp from the shower. She padded into the kitchen, yawning sleepily, and smiled when she saw me. "Morning, babe," she greeted with a kiss to my cheek, her lips grazing my skin. Her voice was soft and sweet, like nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. I stared at her. Her delicate features. Her warm brown eyes. The face of a woman I had once loved. Now, all I saw was deceit. "Morning," I replied, my voice steady, calm like still water. She didn't notice the difference. Of course she didn't. She was too busy plotting the final steps of her betrayal. She poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. Casually, she glanced over at me. "You're leaving early today?" she asked, her tone light. I nodded once, my face impassive. "Big meeting," I lied smoothly. Her eyes flickered briefly, but she didn't press. She simply smiled and stretched lazily, leaning over the counter. "You're working so hard these days," she cooed softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "All for us." I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest. Us. There was no us anymore. Just her and her greed. I finished my coffee, stood up, and grabbed my briefcase. Before leaving, I leaned over and pressed a lingering kiss to her temple, feeling her smile against my lips. "I love you," she murmured, but I didn't say it back. I simply turned and walked out the door, carrying with me the evidence that would destroy her world. I arrived at my lawyer's office promptly at 9. He was already waiting, a grim smile on his face. The night before, we had finalized everything. The divorce papers were ironclad. The financial documents proved her deceit, the stolen money, the embezzled funds, and the secret transfers to her brother and parents. My business assets were safeguarded. The house, the family home my parents had left me, was legally protected. She wouldn't get a dime. "Are you ready?" my lawyer asked, his sharp eyes meeting mine. I was. After signing the final legal notices, we drove straight to Lena's lawyer's office. I insisted on serving her in person. I wanted to see her face when her entire world shattered. By the time I returned home, Lena was waiting for me, dressed in a silky, form-fitting dress, her makeup flawless. She had no idea what was coming. "Hey, you're home early," she greeted with a sultry smile, walking over and looping her arms around my neck. Her perfume was sweet and familiar, but the scent made my stomach turn. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked over to the dining table, pulled out a thick manila folder, and dropped it onto the table with a heavy thud. "What's that?" she asked lightly, tilting her head. I didn't say a word, I simply gestured for her to open it. She hesitated, her brows furrowing slightly, but she complied. Slowly, she flipped through the pages, her smile slipped almost instantly, her face paled as she took in the financial statements, the bank transfers, and the legal documents that laid out her scheme in brutal detail. Her hands began to tremble, the papers shaking slightly in her grip. She glanced up at me, her eyes wide and disbelieving. "What is this?" she stammered. I crossed my arms, watching her coldly. "That," I said evenly, my voice like steel, "is every dollar you and your family stole from me. That is proof of your betrayal." Her breath caught in her throat. She flipped through the pages frantically, her eyes darting over every damning piece of evidence. When she came across the divorce papers, her face crumpled. Her eyes filled with tears, but there was no genuine sorrow, only fear of losing everything. "Peter, no," she choked out, her voice trembling. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away sharply, my jaw clenched. "No more lies," I said coldly. "No more manipulation." She dropped the papers, rushing toward me. Her hands clutched at my shirt, her voice breaking with desperation. "Please, Peter," she sobbed. "You don't understand. I didn't mean for it to go this far. We can fix this." Her lip quivered, and tears streaked her perfectly painted face. Her eyes were wide and pleading, but I felt nothing. No pity. No love. Just cold, righteous fury. "We." I scoffed bitterly. "There is no we, Lena. Not anymore." I stepped back, shaking her off. She clutched at my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Peter, please. I'll make it right. I'll sign whatever you want. Just give me another chance." Her voice cracked with hysteria. But I didn't care. She had made her choice. And now, she would live with it. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. I knew who it was. I had invited them. Lena's face went white as she opened the door to find her parents and brother standing on the porch. Confusion flickered across their faces when they saw her tear-streaked cheeks. Before they could utter a word, I handed them the legal notices. "You'll want to read these," I said curtly. They took the papers, their expressions turning grim as they read. Martha's face twisted in disbelief, her eyes wide with shock. Daniel cursed under his breath, while Richard's lips thinned with fury. "You can't do this." Martha shrieked, her voice shrill, "We're family." I laughed bitterly. "No. You're parasites. And now, you're nothing." They begged. They screamed. They even threatened legal action. But it was too late. I had my proof. I had the law on my side. And they had nothing but their lies and greed. As they stood there, defeated and broken, I turned away, walked into my house, and shut the door in their faces. I stood in the middle of my living room, taking a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt free. They thought they could destroy me. But in the end, they destroyed themselves. In the days that followed, my house was a haven of silence. No more manipulative whispers. No more shallow apologies. No more greedy, grasping hands reaching for what was mine. The storm had passed. And in its wake, they were drowning. It started with the official notices. I made sure the divorce papers were served promptly, with airtight legal backing. Lena tried to stall the proceedings, begging for meetings and negotiations, but I refused. I had instructed my lawyer to be merciless. No extensions. No compromises, let her bleed, I told him coldly. And he did. Once the divorce was in motion, Lena's entire world began to crumble. Her access to my accounts was revoked immediately, the joint accounts were frozen and stripped of any funds, the credit cards she had so freely used were cancelled, no more designer shopping sprees, no more lavish gifts for her family, her financial lifeline was severed, and she was flailing. I made sure she didn't get a single brick of the family home, despite her repeated claims that she was entitled to half. The house was never legally in her name, it had been left to me by my parents, fully paid off years before I even met her. Her lawyer tried to argue for joint ownership, but my legal team shut it down immediately. Your client has no legal claim to this property, my lawyer stated firmly in court. The deeds are solely in Mr. Wilkins' name. The marital assets do not include the property in question. Lena's face had drained of color. She sat rigid in her chair, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering furiously, but it was a lost cause. The judge's gavel came down swiftly. The house was mine. Lena's expression collapsed into pure devastation. Her eyes glimmered with disbelief, lips parting slightly in a silent gasp. She had been so sure she would win. But now, she was walking away with nothing. When her parents and Daniel found out about her legal defeat, they were furious. They began harassing her relentlessly, demanding that she fix it. Martha showed up at her apartment, screeching about her lost retirement plans. Daniel called her repeatedly, threatening to cut her off if she didn't find a way to squeeze more out of me. But there was nothing left to squeeze. She had already lost. Daniel, who had enjoyed my money for years, was the first to fall apart. Without my funds propping him up, he quickly fell into debt. His creditors came calling, and his car was repossessed. The luxury watch he had so proudly flaunted, pawned. Soon, he couldn't even afford his rent. He was evicted and had to move back in with his parents, humiliated and bitter. They had been using my money to pay off their own debts and maintain their lifestyle. Without it, they were forced to sell their second car and remortgage their home. Their credit scores plummeted. Their debts piled up. The lavish family vacations were over. No more expensive shopping trips. No more designer accessories. Just crippling debt and humiliation, but Lena wasn't done yet. Oh no, she was desperate, and desperation makes people do pathetic things. She started calling me incessantly, her voice broke. Peter, please, she whispered tearfully into the phone. I miss you. I made a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. I didn't respond, I simply blocked her number. When that didn't work, she begged mutual friends to intervene, sending tearful messages about how she was ruined without me. Peter, she's a mess, one of our old acquaintances said softly over the phone. She keeps saying she wants to see you, just to talk. I snorted bitterly. She had years to talk. I replied coldly, I'm not interested in her words anymore. After being shut out completely, Lena spiraled further into self-destruction. I later learned that she had a public meltdown at a local restaurant. Apparently, she had been drinking heavily, and when the server refused to give her more alcohol, she started screaming about how her life had been ruined. She was escorted out by security, her makeup streaked with tears, her voice slurring with drunken sobs. By then, most of our acquaintances knew the full story. No one came to comfort her, no one offered sympathy, because everyone knew what she had done. She was just a cautionary tale now, a woman who tried to take everything and ended up with nothing. Lena's family soon came crawling. Her mother called me one evening, her voice syrupy sweet. Peter, sweetheart, she cooed softly. We're still family, right? I mean, we made mistakes, but surely we can work something out. I laughed bitterly. Family, what a joke, family. I asked coldly, you were family when you bled me dry. You were family when you plotted to take everything from me. You're nothing to me now. And I hung up. Daniel, ever the coward, tried a different approach. he showed up at my office one day, reeking of desperation. "You're gonna regret this," he spat. "You think you've won, huh?" I stood, calm and composed, folding my arms across my chest. "I don't think I've won," I replied smoothly, staring him down. "I know I have." He lunged toward me, but security was already there. They dragged him out, and I watched as he screamed obscenities, his face contorted in rage. He had once smirked at my generosity. Now, he seethed with powerlessness. In the months that followed, my life became my own again. I threw myself into my business, expanding it further. I traveled for leisure, something I hadn't done in years. I finally renovated the house, removing every trace of Lena from it. Her paintings came off the walls, her decorations were discarded, and her memories were erased. The home was mine again. The way it was always meant to be. In the end, they were left with nothing. Lena was broke and disgraced, rejected by even her own family, who blamed her for their downfall. Her parents were in debt, and Daniel was jobless and bitter. I was free. Free from their greed, their manipulation, and their deception. And for the first time in years, I felt light and whole again. Because I had reclaimed everything they tried to take from me. And in doing so, I destroyed them completely.